Here, Jim?
Whoa, that's right.
You still
Okay, good.
Okay.
Wait, what's that? What's that?
You should have an email from Jim.
No, I don't yet.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Well, good evening. Great to see you. We have a bunch of new faces. That's wonderful. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Babadook. Let's start off by identifying the 4 through lines. The overall story is sort of the big picture. Can we give me an idea of what's going on in the Babadook? Make it short. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh,
I thought someone was going to say something.
We're all looking at each other for somebody else.
Did anybody see the movie? I know that a couple of people did. Come on.
I guess to sum up, it's a woman and her son trying to get through the anniversary of their father, or his father's death. And
Okay.
they stumble upon a book, and it sort of like the spirit to haunt them.
Okay, so mother and child haunted by boogeyman type thing.
Boogeyman, yeah.
Or I guess I got Babadook, which is
Or some entity.
well, we know it's the Babadook. So.
We know that.
Whatever it might be. So, okay, so who do we think is the main character? Who's the character through whose eyes the audience experiences the story?
The mother.
Mother, and did they know her name? Margaret.
Amelia.
Yeah.
Wow, you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw it and I didn't know.
Well, the very end, they sort of reinforced that.
Right.
She was a baby.
That's true. Yes, she's a nurse. And the influence character,
Samuel. The
who
son.
is the son.
Who did the
Samuel.
Samuel, the
boy.
son,
Oh, the boy.
and their relationship.
That's my favorite son.
Yeah.
Son.
Okay. Well, that was easy. Wow. you find that horror stories tend to be simple. Just by their very nature, they tend to be. They're not always, but they very frequently are. I'm going to start with something I think we can get right off the bat. Outcome, success or failure, and judgment, good or bad, and why. Either one, and need an explanation of why. So this would be, story outcome is there's a goal, is it achieved? If it is, it's success. If it's not, it's failure. And the judgment is there is an inequity. Has it been resolved? That's good. If it's still, lingering and upsetting, then it's bad. It's not that everything is Punch Key or Peach King. There's lots of things that are in the story, but there's going to be something that's central. You usually see it in the main character, but it's a little more story-wide. But that's, you can always look to the main character generally. Oh, come on.
I think it's a success.
Success.
Okay. And success at why? Why is it a success story?
Because the mom and the son.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
We have somebody on speaker.
Because the mother and son, they were able to control the Babadook.
Okay.
And so they were able to conquer it.
Or survive it, or whatever,
Yeah.
manage it. It was going to make them wish they were dead.
Right.
At the end, they don't really wish they were dead. So, okay. So everybody okay with that? Good. All right. How about judgment, good or bad, and why?
Good.
Okay.
For the same reason it wasn't left with I guess they survived it. They seemed happy together, even though we don't know if social services or disband the family or not.
Well, but that would
The lasting moment was them smiling and happy with each
and
other.
particularly Claire.
Yeah.
Yeah, it starts on Claire.
You mean Amelia?
Amelia.
Amelia.
Claire's
her
the sister.
Yeah, Claire's
Yeah.
sister. Amelia. It starts on Amelia's face. She's not in a good place at that moment in the
Yeah.
first scene. At the very end, big happy smile.
Mhm.
Yeah, that usually indicates that she's, things are pretty good. So I just did those because those are low hanging fruit. Doesn't mean the other ones are hard. I just wanted to sort of go with the ones that you always want to start with when you're doing any kind of analysis. Start with what you know best first, because it allows you to start to put pins on the map, and then everything else will start to conform to that. But always start with what you know best first. When I do these things, I tend to follow a certain order. And most, if you've seen the podcasts, you see it pretty much generally follow sort of top down, start with there, top down, do the domains, but not always, because sometimes other things are just really obvious or some things are not really clear. So it's a really good tactic, especially when you're doing it on your own work. If you're doing an analysis of something you've done, take what you see in the analysis and see what's there and answer those things first that you're most sure of. If you're creating something, answer the ones that you want to be there. Since you're making it up, you can pick anything. So pick the ones that you want to make sure that are in the story, then everything else will make sure that they support them. All right, so main character resolve. Does Amelia change or is she a changed character or steadfast character? And how do we know? Okay. And how do we know?
Oh, I think we're all completed.
Sure.
Yeah. She starts off like depressed and like haunted by her own emotions, and then in the end she's happier.
And I'm just going to tease a little more out of that, just because I think there's some really good illustrations that are there. How do we know, other than the fact that seems to be okay? How else do we know that she's more or less different?
I think one of the big things is the fact that he's never had a birthday before. And this time she is allowing him to keep the little banner up of happy birthday, and she's able to actually, instead of yell about it or tell like her neighbor to stop talking about it, she was able to articulate to the social workers, well, yeah, this is when his father died and we are having his birthday. And
Excellent. Yeah. So they were made really explicitly clear.
The basement.
Huh?
The basement too.
Yeah, the basement as well. The basement is partially objective story, the big picture, and partially her.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like it's her, but I think primarily, the having dealt with her past, the tragedy and everything that dealt with her son's birthday, the date of the anniversary of her husband's death, has been verboten, and now she's, it's still traumatic, but it's out there. It's not something that's internalized any longer.
Also, I think just another illustration is she's a lot more tolerant, or she actually embraces his magic acts and his little games and things that he does instead of trying to shut him down all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah.
Okay. Main character approach, doer or beer. A doer is someone who prefers to solve problems externally by changing their environment. A beer is someone who prefers to do work internally by changing essentially themselves to adapt to the problem. And it's a preference. It's not something that the story necessarily requires, but if they had their choice, they would prefer to do it one way or another. How do you see with Claire? How does she deal with personal problems?
Sounds like they're not there.
Okay, but is that an expression of dealing with it externally or dealing with it
More
internally?
internally.
Okay, so she would be a beer in that instance. Can you think of other instances, or specific instances of that?
Yeah.
Think of it most when they're ideally when they're Amelia moments.
Yeah.
Not necessarily something dealing with the Babadook itself, but when Amelia is dealing with her own baggage.
When she's working at the old folks' home, she has to deal with, like when she's playing bingo, she has to deal with her environment is affecting her and just adapts to it and doesn't really changes.
I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
or the milk thing too.
Yeah,
I don't
I'll
want
just go
that.
change the
Okay,
milk.
I'll get you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, she definitely does seem to be, well, I mean, I think that's the whole movie is about,
Yeah.
frankly, you know, her internalizing problems.
You know, when she gets depressed, she goes
Or just her
and takes
TV.
care of herself.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
the other
okay.
Well, and she goes out and just sits on a park bench and just sort of, you know, enjoys peace too. I mean, that when she gets out and has sort of a day off, you know, hooky, you know, plays hooky, she doesn't immediately rush home and take care of Samuel. She's like, oh, hey, I've got some me time before I have to go pick him up at her sisters. Okay, so that sounds. I think that sounds.
By contrast, I think Samuel is very clearly a doer.
Yeah.
He's just,
Well, yes.
he's such a doer, and he's, you know,
I mean, a
and
perfect
she-
example. Look at the two different reactions to the Babadook. He's, I'm going to build contraptions, and I'm going to have
Yeah.
all these things, and I'm going to kill him, and I'm going to chop his head off, and I'm going to do all this stuff. Meanwhile, she just internalizes it, and literally internalizes the Babadook. You know, so that's why she's sort of open to it, because she's naturally brings things inside as opposed to outside. So it's a you know, whether it's clearly not metaphorical, because there are things that apparently are more objective reality, things that we're seeing that other characters are saying, that make the Babadook not just a figment of her. She's not. This isn't just a woman, a mother going crazy story, which, you know, it could have been, but they wanted to be. It's a little more literal and a little more of a horror movie than that. Okay, problem-solving style, linear or holistic. This is also known as the main character mental sex, male and female. Basically, a linear problem solver looks to sees a goal and finds the steps to get to that goal, looks for cause and effect. A holistic problem solver looks to balance or imbalance, try to find ways to rebalance things, or look at relationships and see where connections are. As a technique to trying to understand problems. I mean, problems really don't exist in the holistic world, but they're not really seen as problems, but they're imbalances. So where do we put Amelia? Is she a linear or a holistic thinker, and why?
Maybe more than
Give an instance.
like when she thought like some of the problems that she hadn't been sleeping because her son was keeping her out because of his fears. So her recourse to deal with that was to ask the doctor to give her some pills. Like, here's a step, you take these pills and then I can sleep, and then we'll be back on the course. It's just like 1, 2, 3, kind of to solve the situation.
And when she believes that someone is stalking her, what does she do?
She goes to the cops and files a report.
Right, not really realizing how that might look. She sort of figures that out after she gets those strange looks and thought, oh, this might make me look like a crazy person because there's no evidence, and this. But she's like, okay, if I do this, this will happen. Right. Is that, are we okay with that? Anybody feel differently? Okay.
Counter argument.
Good. Great. All right. And the story driver. Do actions drive decisions, or decisions drive actions, and why?
I think actions happen. I mean, it starts with the beginning of the story is the accident, and you know, some of the turning points are, you know, the book showing up.
Right. It just shows up.
It just shows up.
Right. That's a really important aspect of it.
And it seems like the resolution, yeah, and I'm trying to think of other, like,
And then it shows up again.
again, right. But then the creepy crawly thing, comes in and I guess kind of invades,
Right.
but it seems to be going inside her mouth. It seems to be invading her body. But the resolution is, I guess it kind of gets trapped in the basement, or it's caught in the basement, and that's where it stays. And at that point, it's when everything seems to be resolved.
Right. Now, okay, is everybody okay with the actions driving decisions?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so ramification, one of the things that as we're doing this, when you start making these binary choices, several things happen. First of all, when you pick one, you're not losing the other. So it's like a Rubik's Cube, it's like, do I turn it left or right? Not, do I take this and throw that out? So every story is going to have all of it. It's just the meaning comes from how you align things. The second thing is that even though we've got binary decisions, when you combine them with other aspects, especially the dynamics, they start to have harmonics. So when you have a doer in an action story or a beer in a decision story, the way that the main character prefers to solve problems and the way that thing drives the story forward are aligned, and that character feels very comfortable. When you have a doer in a decision story or a beer in an action story, they feel very disabled or out of water because the way they prefer to solve problems is ineffectual in the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And that's another way when creating your story. As a consideration, you want to have that character feel more discombobulated or, be right in there, feel really comfortable with it. So it's a way to create that disorientation for your main character, that reluctance inherently in the structure of the story, and that's apart from whatever, way you want to dress it up. So when you start answering these things, there are other dynamics that resonate with it, just like a success good story is a happy ending, a failure bad story is a tragedy, and then the success bad and failure good are bittersweet endings. So you get those resonances, and most audiences pick up on not the individual pieces, but the resonance of them. So they'll get a happy ending, or they'll get a sense of a tragedy, or they'll get a sense of a bittersweet ending. But they very often just don't parse it down beyond that, because it's not necessary. They understand what that is. Story limit, time lock or option lock? Does the story run out of time, meaning is there a deadline? There's sort of an implied deadline with the birthday, which could have been emphasized but wasn't really, because that is a specific date, although we didn't know what day it was. Or it could be a certain amount of time, like it could have been 1 week until his birthday, and then the days are counted down, essentially. Or it's an option, like there's a certain number of options that can be met, or a certain amount of territory that needs to be covered is another way of looking at option lock. And by a certain number of options, the easy one is you've got 3 wishes. By the time you use the 3rd wish, it's time to pay or play. You've got the crisis will occur. So this brings about the crisis. It doesn't bring about the end of the story. It's what will bring it to a crisis point.
I think a little bit when the social worker said, okay, we'll be back, you have this many days to go through some steps before we return. Hopefully you'll be ready.
So how many days actually transpired? Did we have, was there a sense of that during the whole story?
No.
Not really. So it's like the end of Star Wars. There's the little countdown at the end. You're going to have time locks in an option lock driven story. You're going to have option locks in a time lock driven story. So you're going to have them both. It's like the movie 16 Blocks. Well, they actually have a deadline. It's really a time lock because everything has to happen by 11 a.m. in the morning. But they have a certain amount of distance supposedly they have to cover. But the fact that they go all over the place, go way more than those 16 blocks, really is an indicator that wasn't the limit. And it really was a time lock. But you can put those in to make it feel even more tense. And they will tend to, if you have a time lock, you will tend to feel like you're running out of options because you've got more options than you can possibly explore in that amount of time. So you're kind of like having to go through them faster and faster. And if you have an option lock, you feel like you're running out of time because you have as much time as you want, but when you lose an option, suddenly anything that went with it, that amount of time that you could have spent on it is gone. So it feels like you're running out of time. This is a really weird dynamic that happens. So in this story,
I felt like more like they're running out of options and time, you know, so like they were time bound.
okay, so what would those options be? What's driving this? What is what is the goal essentially?
To get rid of the Babadook.
Okay, so how many ways are they that they can actually deal with it? And now the book actually gives you pretty much exactly all of the clues is what's going to the steps.
Okay.
Yeah, the first chapter.
Remember, and you know, the more that you
Yeah.
disbelieve me, the more powerful I get, and all those things, which is one of the reasons. I mean, so the solution to the problem is built into that. So when she fully believes in him, she's able to disempower him, or it, or whatever, the Babadook. But as long as she didn't believe it, it was gaining greater and greater power. So it was, I mean, the way they set up that book was very clever because it gave you really the steps that were going to happen. And the reason we know it's a success story, because the end of the second version of the book had her killing her son and herself.
And that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how we know. But that was a necessary step. That was like the step right before. Okay, you know, right? Exactly, and that's when she transformed. You know, that was as far as she could go without actually going full on tragedy at that point.
Question. So it's not a time lock just because, I mean, for me, I thought it was a time lock because there was this big deal with like having her son's birthday, not actually celebrating on his birthday. So
Right, but that's a condition. That's not a date. I mean,
Okay.
a time lock is literally a date or
Okay.
a time. You know, it will be noon on Wednesday.
Right.
You know, you can't have it on, 5 o'clock on Wednesday. It's noon, or it's on the 31st, or whatever it is. That is a time lock. Now, interestingly, and you've probably heard say this a million times on the podcast, but I'll say it once again because it seems to be appropriate right now. When you're considering who your audiences are, every audience has a blind spot. Every type of audience has a particular kind of blind spot. And then specifically, if you think of the male audience and the female audience, this is a generalization about it. So specifics will change on an individual by individual basis. But for men, typically, if you have a holistic main character, they don't get that. They can sense it, they can sort of logic it, but they can't feel it. There's no empathy for that. So they can stand by your main character, but they really can't. It's very difficult for them to stand in that main character's shoes and really feel what the main character is going through. And my best example of that is Twilight. Because most friends just hate it. And if you really don't like the movie, read the book. It's really painful. Women don't have either one is fine. That's not where the blind spot is. The blind spot happens to be the time lock. And meaning it's very difficult for women to empathize with what exactly a time lock means, because for women, time can be sort of squishy, and men can't understand that. It's very regimented for men. It's all it has to be really broken up and very consistent. We can conceive of what squishy time might be, but it's definitely not the way we see the world. So the idea of a time lock from a female mental sex point of view makes no sense, because how could it be locked when it's squishy? It's, you know, variable. So this is the one where the female audience tends to not empathize with, and whereas, you know, this one, the holistic, is thought of as a chick flick. The time lock is thought of as a dick flick. So it's the ones that go, guys, go on, go guys, you go see the movie. I'm not really interested in that one. We're on the ticking bomb. Okay. Option lock, not a problem. So, you know, again, all of these things have to do with trying to communicate to your audience. And sometimes you want to really involve everybody in your audience. Well, then a option lock, male mental sex, or linear thinking main character story has the greatest potential to involve everybody at an episodic level. The flip side of that is a holistic time lock movie, which is ones where you might want to not want your audience to actually empathize. So you'll find probably, you know, in our culture you don't find a lot of them. Because our culture has sort of like, well, stay away from it, probably because it's not very commercial. But they're good for stories where you're trying to, you know, say beware. You know, here's this tragic character going down this path. Now, we're not going to make you stand in their shoes, but we're going to let you walk by them and understand what happens. But, you know, this is the way those kinds of stories end up. It's tragic. So we've got all of our choices here, except I left growth, because if you select growth, and as well as some of these others, then it'll automatically limit where you can place the domains on the chart, and I don't like doing that because that's usually, again, I think a lot more, gives you more opportunities to explore it if it's not already saying, nope, it's going to be this or that. So, any other questions about the dynamics before we just move on to? Okay, here we go. So now what we want to do is look at the domains, and the idea is to take one of these 4 through lines, each of the 4 through lines, and assign one to each domain. Now there are basically there's one set of rules. The main character and influence character are what we call a dynamic pair, and the overall story and the relationship are a dynamic pair, meaning those 2 pairs always have to be a diagonal relationship to one another. So if you place one, you always know where the other one is. So whenever you pick one, you've already really had to pick 2. So in order to set your domains, the maximum number of choices you can make is 2, because you automatically know where the other ones are, right? So anybody have any ideas about where any of these 4 through lines might appear on the domain chart?
Samuel in activity is pretty.
Okay.
Well,
Because
his source of his problems is always he's doing stuff. It's getting him in trouble.
okay.
He's fighting, he's pushing people, he's running around.
Which would put our main character in sort of the psychology domain. Okay. She definitely is having psychological issues. Okay, so where would you put the overall story?
in situation.
I'd say fixed attitude, only because not everyone is dealing with the situation with Babadook. Just the 2 of them.
I would say the relationship wouldn't go into situation. The relationship between the 2 is more of a fixed attitude.
Well, remember, now the thing is that if it's the overall story is going to involve everybody. So what are the events? What are the things that happen? What are the areas of conflict that exist in the story for everyone?
Everyone has opinions about parenting or dealing with grief that are kind of fixed, I think. And I think that those are the issues. I think those are what's causing the problems.
Can you give some examples?
Yeah, Claire's just like, hey.
Well, don't use Claire.
Well, no,
Claire's the sister.
Oh, Claire, I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah,
use Claire.
she's
Sorry.
Claire.
Use Claire.
Yeah. She tells her sister, hey, it's been 7 years, get over it. The school teachers are, saying this is how you should be a parent. The nice little old lady next door thinks they need to be open about what happened and everything's okay. You can talk about your problems. You can talk about her Parkinson's or
Right.
deceased father. That's
Oh, that's a
fine.
good example. Okay. And what about the Babadook? Since that is ostensibly one of the objective characters, one of the overall story characters.
Yeah, even he's like died.
No, he's
no, kill
he
yourself.
actually, yeah, he pretty much think of the book as his voice. What does the book say about
Let
him?
me in.
Let me in.
Let your
But-
grief overwhelm you. I mean, die and let it kill you.
Well, the more you don't believe me,
The stronger
Where you don't
I am.
acknowledge it. Right.
right?
So basically, the more you cop an attitude, the bigger badass I'm going to become.
Or
Right.
the more you believe it cannot, I do not exist, the stronger you make.
The more you suppress your
So the
yeah.
Yeah.
so the stronger your fixed attitude is, essentially,
Right.
the
right.
stronger he gets. Basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's because I've been having a lot of trouble understanding fixed attitude.
Think of it as either prejudice or preconception, fixation. I mean, fixed attitude is. I mean, if you think of a conflict or fixed attitudes, just think a clash of attitudes. You know, if someone's got an ideology, that's another type of fixed attitude. It's really a fixed state of mind. It's what you think is, and the fact that you're not, it's frozen, and the fact that it's immovable is what's causing conflict.
Stubborn.
Stubborn, yeah, that would be a form of pig-headed. All of those are sort of variations on fixed attitude.
Bigot would be a form of
Bigotry, right?
But how do you, how would you discern the difference? For example, Samuel has a fixed attitude with regards to he's sure that there's a monster, like he's 100% sure there's no question about it. What makes his domain actually activity instead of fixed attitude?
Because his attitude doesn't cause him a problem except in the big picture with his cousin, with his aunt, with his school, with his mom. So it does cause a problem for him in that context.
Mhm.
However, with him doing things, that's what affects her. That's what drives her nuts, you know, effectively. That's what makes her go, you know, it's what influences her and pushes her toward changing. Because remember, really, what the story isn't about Samuel; it's about Amelia, and the influence character. We've had 3 different names for the influence character since the beginning. It was originally the obstacle character, which is if you
Yes.
looked at the whole process. What?
No, go ahead, sir.
If you look at the whole process completely objectively, as an author, you're not trying to involve yourself in being in the story at all, but just like dealing with it objectively. The influence character is the obstacle to the main character's avoidance of the problem. They try to avoid it. Well, oh, nope, can't go there because here's this guy or this person or this other perspective that's forcing me to deal with it. So that's why I originally called it an obstacle character. Then, but that's a really dispassionate way of looking at it. Like many of the original terms were that really dispassionate, analytical way of looking at it. And a lot of writers had a hard time connecting with it, understandably. Then we switch it to impact character. Now, an impact character, that's someone who's more proactive, someone who's like Obi-Wan, is trying to have this, you know, change, you know, see the world differently. Things are not the way you're looking at it. You know, you're looking at it all wrong. You know, but not all stories are about that kind of direct confrontation. So we then change it to influence character because influence can be proactive or it could be, you know, just there. You know, it doesn't have to have an intent behind it. Impact generally assumes a little more intent, or at least an agency, if not intent. And whereas influence doesn't. Influence is sort of there. For my taste, it can be a little mamby-pamby influence, because if you really want it to impact or you really want it to be an obstacle, influence doesn't hold that. But the idea is that it's the concept of this alternative perspective that in one context is totally different than the main character, and in the other it's the same. It's very much the same. And that's what makes them have that affinity with and also conflict with the main character.
Mm-hmm.
My most recent way of describing that relationship is, you always think of, okay, I've got a problem, there's a fork in the road, do I take the left fork or the right fork? Whichever fork the main character has taken, the influence character is the other one. This is what would happen if you take the other fork. And so if you've already taken that fork and you're now in trouble, the other one's going, you really should have take the right. It's still time, you can take that right fork, not the left one. That's the difference between the two. All right, so right now we have it so that it is, we have the main influence character in activity, main character in psychology or manipulation.
It's interesting that you never see Samuel. I don't remember seeing Samuel perform magic tricks in front of anybody else other than his mother.
That is true.
Right, and something about that was kind of impactful. But yeah, he only did magic in front of
Yeah, I
her
think they had like a mime or something that was doing some tricks
for the other kid. Right, he
And
never.
his recourse wasn't to watch and on, was to go hide up in the treehouse.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and their relationship as situation is, I think that one seems to be fairly clear. But I'm not going to say it. So, what you guys say? What is it about their fixed situation, external station, that in their relationship that defines their relationship that is troublesome? Come on. Anybody? Huh?
Well, I mean, it's the fact that they are mother and son, and
Nope, that's not a problem.
well, but he.
No, not the Babadook.
You're being terrorized.
No, I
No,
think the fact that, especially like the reminder of every time she looks at him, she also sees the loss of her husband. And
It's
then his
the fact-
birthday,
It's the fact that he was born on the day her husband died while taking him to the hospital to be born.
Yeah.
That's the situation that cannot be changed, and as long as it's reminding the past is inexorably tied to that, she can't see anything else except the death of her husband when she sees her son, especially around that date.
Yeah.
That's the situation.
Yeah.
Those two events happened simultaneously.
As she tells him, it should have been you that died.
Right.
That would have resolved the relationship if the kid
Right.
was dead.
Yeah. And her husband survived. Right. But that is the nature of what a situation is. It's an external state or status that is unchanged and changing, and the fact that it's unchanging because we're looking at everything in terms of trouble. That's what a conflict is bubbling up from in that context. So in reality, what a story is a entire exploration of a single imbalance. So something is out of balance. Well, how do we know where it is? Well, where can we look for it? We can look for it externally or internally. We can look for a state or process. And we can use different perspectives of way of looking at the world. We could see it, what does it look like when I'm in context of me or you or us or them, that objective. So the combinations of all of those things basically is what creates those domains and the through lines. That's why there are exactly 4, and that's why, all of these things, this is just the way we think. And so a story explores all of those and gives us a sense that there's a truth in there, because we're really making a very complicated box to draw around it and say, well, inside this box, everything works. It's complete fabrication. but we don't care. You know, it's when we buy into a story, we know it's fabricated, but then we just can experience it. All right, great. I think that's actually a really good combination. So now I'm going to pop over to this chart over here, and if you haven't done so already online, this chart and the three-dimensional version of it are available for download, and you can just bring them over to Kinko's and they can print it at whatever size you want. If you need them this big, unless you happen to have a wall to draw.
You guys are good.
But I think the size that we have it in there is 11 by 17. So $2 at Kinko's, you can pretty much get that with it. So what we do now is we go to the concerns, which is the next smaller size. So if we said in the overall story, okay, it's dealing with fixed attitude. Now, what part of fixed attitude, you know, break it down even further, is it in the memory and impulsive responses, contemplations, or innermost desire? Or looking at Amelia, is it in, you know, developing a plan or conceptualizing something, or is it playing a role, or is it conceiving an idea, or is it changing one's nature? So each one of these will have a subset, and we call it concern. So the domain is the broadest area of conflict, and you can narrow it down, which is closer to what one would consider a goal. A goal is sort of like a crystallized version of a concern. So the main character will have a concern, and whichever one you pick, it's going to be the same. In this case, it's color coded. It's going to be the same color in all four domains. So you only have, in this case, you only have to pick one. So you've got the developing a plan, past, understanding, memories quadrant. That's the upper left quadrant. The upper right, how things are changing, doing, also responses, playing a role. The lower right, present, gathered information, which is sort of learning, contemplations, and conceiving an idea. And then you've got future, obtaining, innermost desires, and changing one's nature. So anybody have a suggestion for any of those that might be the concerns?
Well, within the situation, it would be the past.
Okay.
Or, yeah, perhaps the past.
All right. Well, what would be the example for in their relationship? We talked just about some of that right now. Is that consistent all the way through the story? That's the other thing, because this level is also where you see essentially act order. So you're going to see all of them at one time or another in the story. And the difference between the signposts, or the type order, and the concern is the concern will be in every single act. It'll be consistent all the way through, whereas each one will be dominant within one act of the story. So if it was past, then we would see understanding, and this is a good time to mention, each of these can be seen as positive, negative, too much, too little. So past and understanding is also misunderstanding. Memory is also forgetting, and developing a plan, or lacking a plan is another way of looking at it. So do you see any of the other examples? So for instance, in the overall story, that would mean that people are dealing with memories. How do we see that? This is the one where everybody in the story is.
I mean, it's exactly what John was describing earlier when you fixed attitude is the issue amongst the relatives and our neighbors is the memory of what happened on the kid's birthday, right?
Yeah, basically, there's sort of a Frozen song in there, right? Let it go.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of what they're all trying to tell her? And which gets to the question about what is the Babadook? What is it? There's some really big hints in there, especially by where it ends up. And kind of where it starts.
The dad.
Of the love.
The denial. The-
Right. Remember, the first place we know that there's something going on is when it involves the dog.
Oh, he starts to scratch at the basement door.
Right. And the door is locked.
Right.
That's basically what that is.
That's where all Dad's stuff is. It's all that suppressed, whatever, blackness down in the basement that is collecting for the last 7 years,
What does it say?
and has
that-
manifested itself in the form of this creature who, not surprisingly, shows up looking like Dad. Remember, on more than one occasion, it manifests looking like her husband on the day he died, you know. So, I mean, I think it's supposed to be all those suppressed memories, all of that darkness. I mean, literally that black that she spits up, the black that comes up as a rose in the very last scene where she's pruning, and she's, you know, when they're collecting the worms and stuff. There's this big black rose right in the foreground, and it's not because it's shadowed; it's actually black. I think that's what it hasn't gone away. All it's done is they've learned to manage it. You know, so this is what you had said. It wasn't that they conquered, it wasn't they got rid of it. They were able to conquer it, to tame it, to deal with it. And sort of like the story you were talking about in your short story, it's the same kind of thing. And it's interestingly, this was, I believe, directed and written by women. And that's a very holistic way of solving a problem. A guy would kill it, but that's not who the authors are. What they did is they learned how to deal with it, to manage it, to balance it.
Yeah, just
Literally
control it.
feed
confront
it.
it.
You know,
Right.
That's an interesting metaphor.
Right. So you've got, I mean, it's all set up really well. And if you think about what it is, then if it falls into memory, it's perfect. You've got to deal with those memories that are all bottled up in the basement.
Acknowledge.
Right. And the son was doing that. He was going down there, going through this stuff. And so this is why it's not his problem. It's
Right.
hers.
He's the one who says, you know, oh yeah, my father died the day I was born. Oh, he just speaks his mind, you know.
Just like his father.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Again, another reason why he's an influence character, because he's constantly reminding her of her husband. Yeah, so, I mean, I think that those are two good arguments for making, in fact, having it in that quadrant. Now, we have understanding. You see him, and in terms of where Samuel is, he's constantly being misunderstood. He is talking literally, not figuratively. And his mom is misunderstanding him. You know, she does not think that he's talking literally, that there is literally a monster loose. You know, and that these things that he has concocted to fight it, which actually work, because remember, he uses it on her when she's in her monster mode. You know, they're effective. They're non-lethal, but they're good at stopping her from getting them. And then you know, and she's trying to figure out how to make things work. She's been, you know, she's working, and she's got this child who's, you know, difficult, and she has no love life. I mean, that's the one thing. She's you know, an adult woman who's not had any kind of personal life or relationship for 7 years, and everything is bottled up, and it's pretty dysfunctional. Now, so I think that's it's a pretty strong quadrant, especially if you look at, because they're consistent act to act to act. And that's the important part. That's how you know it's concerned, and not just one of the signposts. All right.
also Also for her, the four thematic things underneath, just the state of being, sense of self, situation, circumstances.
Oh, yeah,
and that
excellent.
speaks even more, I think, than
I think that does describe her. That's that's where Hamlet is too.
She has no plan to do it.
Well, right, and she's unable to develop a plan.
Yeah.
She's basically incapable of developing a plan. And whatever plans that she had are dissolving for her. They're devolving. And you can easily see this sort of state of being, sense of self conflict for her. Who am I versus who am I really, or who am I now, versus what do I think of myself? I shouldn't be like this. I shouldn't be thinking of these things of my. You see that dichotomy with the argument between essentially where she is as the Babadook and where she is as mom. That what she's saying on the one hand and what she's thinking afterward, going, oh my God, I shouldn't say those things. I'm not that kind of person. Where she really is also feeling those terrible things that she's saying. And when some part of her, it's actually truth coming out. So let's bring up the software at this point, and I'm going to use the screen instead of the projector. I believe, although I think I need to get my adapter. Plug that in for me. I've got to run in. Wow. Thank you, Stephen, for wrecking this all up. A nice little bundle. Different directions, too. Sandy, can I ask you just to plug this in? I'm going to get the adapter. All right.
Agnes, are you still there? Agnes, are you there but on mute?
Can you guys hear me on the computer or no?
I just heard you on the speakerphone. Are you getting anybody yet, Jim, on the computer?
Watching.
Do you have anybody interactive on the computer? Okay.
I have the thing. Well, I'm watching it, but I don't know that I'm.
No, she's not.
It's like I'm dramatically good.
But you're either in watch only mode or in interactive mode.
Oh.
Oh wow! Oh.
Wow, it says that. Talk about a delay.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
because
there
she's hearing.
Oh, here we go.
There's the delay in going to the online broadcast, and then
That's
it's
the
coming back.
longest delay I've heard.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
it's
on
like
here.
Going around the world several times.
Okay.
Yeah. Like a minute later.
Oh, check that down.
Okay, yeah. And if you do want to interact, you will have to do it on speakerphone. I don't think you'll be able to interact on the computer.
Okay.
What was that?
That was just him again.
The really long delay of our voices
Just
going
him
through.
again. Oh, God.
Yeah, and playing on her computer and then coming through the speakerphone.
I'll just listen to that. All right. So, bring up Expert. All right, so I'll just answer the question for Dan. We said change, beer, linear, action, option lock, success, good. Yeah, it's a, it's a not an American one because it's a success good story. Very few horror movies have happy endings over here.
I'd say all the movies now, their whole theme is there's nothing you can do, just accept it. And,
Right.
Sort of like Shakespeare. Yeah.
All right. We've had relationship is up with the past. So as you can see, we by just setting the past, we automatically have all four concerns are established for us. So now what I'm going to do, apart from saving this,
Take this down.
sure, I'm not sure. Yeah, right.
Make it easier to see.
Let's go to the theme browser, and I'm going to bring up the font a bit. I'm not sure that it'll. No, I don't think it's actually. No, it's not. So I'll just zoom in. So let's go to first our main character we were talking about here. And so now we've got, this is all under developing a plan. Oh, interesting. Right, so that's right, that's what we should do. So we've got state of being, situation, circumstances, and sense of self. And then under each of those, we have four. We have a quad of 4 elements. So under state of being, we have knowledge, thought, inertia, and change. Under situation, actuality, perception, order, and chaos. Under circumstances, aware, self-aware, equity, inequity. And under sense of self, ability, desire, projection, and speculation. Any of those, can we rule any of them in or any of them out? Do any of them just sound like, you know, nothing rings? Or any of them have an element of
I mean, I kind of like circumstances, but I'm not like, I don't want to select that just yet. I mean, aware, self-aware is kind of good for her personally. But then again, knowledge, thought. I do, you know, I kind of like projection just because, and that might be under, under the I mean that could apply to the overall story. Is that there is a projectioning going on?
projecting.
Sure. Sure. Make up words. Okay.
This is I've switched over to the overall story, and so now you see that we've got truth, falsehood, evidence, and suspicion. Under truth, we have knowledge, thought, of actuality, perception. Under evidence, ability, desire, aware, self-aware. Under suspicion, order, change, order, chaos, inertia, change, and falsehood, we have equity, inequity, projection, and speculation. Well, just look at that. Let's just think of the issue level: truth, falsehood, evidence, suspicion. Do any of those? What seems to be where we see the sort of the water cooler conversations about what's going on with the Babadook or with Amelia's family? You know, the goings on at their house. You know, you would hear it from the coworker and her sister and the people from the state checking up on the kid. I mean, certainly.
Most of them think, I think, from the outside, think that the kid's the problem. It isn't until we go inside the house and really kind of just along with the two of them that we see really see that something deeper going on with the mother actually.
Well, I think it depends on which group. It looks like all the official people think
Like-
it's her.
Like the
Like the
sister
police?
there likes
Yeah.
to hang out with the in the beginning, especially with the sister, and when she was saying the reason why I don't come over more often is
Because of your child.
because of your child. The school is talking to the mother, and they're not saying, we think you're the problem. They're saying, we think we need to get your kid a mentor. Something's clearly wrong with him. And wherever she goes, she's pretty much getting that. It's only afterwards when we go deeper into the house that we start seeing more things, and that's when she specifically, when she gets the second book and goes to the cops, and then they're looking at her like, "Are you okay?" And she's looking at like maybe they're looking at me like I'm not okay, and then she leaves. But that's only later. All the beginning established is with the kid. All the
It's bad behavior. Although, her behavior is not so great either.
definitely not. But it seems to be like everyone in the beginning is just kind of. The speculation is at first, we know something's wrong with the kid. We know something's something's off there, but you don't discover until later that it's not. There's more going on.
There is a lot of, you do see a lot of suspicion and evidence. I suspect somebody's stalking me. Well, what's the evidence? Or we suspect there's something wrong with the kid, and there's some clear evidence for that. He's carrying a weapon.
Well,
on his back.
yeah, they had the backpack. They
But-
had the crossbow. With the
Crossbow, that's what, yeah. But I'm wondering though if the thematic core of the story, in terms of its meaning, doesn't rest with the truth and falsehood, because certainly the truth of
That makes no sense.
I just feel like that's more of what this is about, and at its center. Does this thing exist or not?
Yeah.
Is it in the imagination or not? And should it be dealt with as such, as a real thing or not? And so that's where
But- Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead. I'm talking out loud.
I think it goes back to that. Is the Babadook real or not? Is the problem with the boy or with something, or with the mother or not? Or what, there's like 3 or 4 things I think where it constantly is asking what is true and what is not
right.
to the audience.
Mhm.
I think.
And we're all constantly
Yeah.
we're asking the questions, is this really happening, or is this a dream, or is this a hallucination? So I think it is playing with the question of truth and falsehood very heavily,
Yeah.
making us guess, really.
Well, what is the poem in the Babadook? What is the poem in the book? Other than the knock, knock, knock part, is let me in, let me in. Yeah.
Whether through word or through sight or something like that.
Or look.
Yeah. What? Yeah. That's how we can. Yeah. Whether I don't know how the poem went, but it basically starts off with whether a word or with a look. Once you do, you'll have the Babadook, and there's nothing you can do to get rid of him.
Right.
And then that's the main essence of the poem.
Hmm.
And then what he does, and then what's underneath you don't want to see, because if you do, you wish you were dead. So whatever, when you look underneath, is worse than death. And then in the end, she really does look, and he runs.
So this is good. Go ahead.
Well, even though there's whether or not the Babadook is real or not, isn't that just between the
Right,
mom and the
just
son?
under-
It's not really between everybody. Like
Because I mean
the,
that
the moms don't know anything about that. The police don't know anything about that.
right. So
What's problematic is like this kid's being abused somehow, or this kid's got some kind of issues. It's really evident that he needs
he needs
he needs to be taken away. And if you're talking about suppressed emotions and stuff, then it seems like desire sounds more like the problem.
Okay. This is where we have the influence character under that instinct, conditioning, senses, and interpretation.
Where'd you go? Oh,
I went to the influence character domain.
yeah, and I feel like that one's really clear.
Okay, go for it.
Well, because he's all about perception, self-aware, and aware.
Right.
Yeah. And the only thing that will demotivate him is if people know actually what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with, actually, you're looking at this quadrant, the senses quadrant.
Yeah, except that
It won't line up.
that term doesn't necessarily line on the impact character, doesn't necessarily line up with the four underneath it. So, but
No, I know. The question is if it's what's underneath it, then you go with what's underneath it.
Because it's like a double whammy. He's the only one that perceives the Babadook, and also everybody has this perception of him that he's just got mental issues or that he's a troubled child.
Right.
And that the way everybody else perceives him has a huge impact on her personally.
okay. So that would be a problem of perception.
For him, yeah.
All right, which would make aware and self-aware the symptom and response, which would put
Conditioning is the issue.
conditioning. Interesting.
Makes his critical flaw senses.
The main character's critical flaw senses.
The main character critical, right.
What she's she can't trust. She can't trust what she sees.
Right,
And no one
she's
can
constantly she's constantly seeing things that aren't there.
right, and no one else can really trust what she's seeing. So with aware, self-aware. Let's see.
Well, let's just go to, let's look and see what. Let's see, get this section.
So, put it under.
All right, so by doing this, we've got the main character, an issue of sense of self, which I think is absolutely wrong. Puts the problem as a desire, which is what you're talking about.
Because her problem is she's longing for her husband and she can't let him go.
Right.
And then she finally is able to
And there
put
was
him in the basement.
speculation as being her symptom, but the response is projection. In other words, so if we speculate as what's the problem, if we speculate, that's when we get into trouble. So we just have to see where we are and project out where is it likely to go, and that's how we're going to deal with it. So if he's imagining things, and this is going to be, so let's just put him to sleep. So that's the easiest way to, if we put him to sleep, then the problem will go away. Or if then that's the way she would be thinking. It's the overall story, memories, issue of evidence, which again,
Okay.
that was the one
There's plenty. Yeah, there's plenty of evidence for evidence. I think.
Desire being the problem. Again, in this context, desire as a negative are fears. You get negative desire, the fears, the hates, all those evil things that she's been thinking about have sort of created this creature from all of that, all of her. I mean, even think of her desires. I mean, her suppressed desires that have been bottled up for 7 years. And those little looks that she keeps on seeing in other people, that's because that's what she's dealing with too. So in her through line, desire being a problem, I think that works nicely. And then I really do like the self-aware because essentially a symptom of self-aware means that people are sort of, when they're really aware of who they are and aren't really thinking about others, it creates trouble. So it's sort of like they're in their own space and they're sort of ignoring others. It's kind of like a a very focused version of self-interest, but it's not about it. It's not a selfishness. It's just I'm so absorbed with my world, and you see her sister is exactly like that. The cousin is exactly like that. You know, they're all in their own little worlds. Each one, whether it's the policeman or the social workers, or they have their little spheres, and that's the only context they're looking at. But it's trying to solve the problem is trying to, okay, let's look out, and how does it affect others?
It's like, you know, you always talk about yourself, but you never ask me how I'm doing. What she says to her sister.
Right.
Yeah.
Catalyst of suspicion. I think that's pretty good in the overall story. So in other words, the story gets moved forward when suspicion, either a cast or someone's under suspicion. And the inhibitor of prediction. And I think that's what the book comes in. And then the book says, here's what's going to happen. And so she knows where it's going, so she's trying to keep those things from happening. And that kind of holds the natural flow of it back. You know, she didn't know what if the book hadn't told her what's going to happen next, then she might have just done those things, but she's knowing it slows things down.
Okay.
It's a warning.
Right, it's a warning, exactly. Right. And the Babadook is the one who's basically not only telling but showing. Remember the pop-up graphic images of what's going to happen. You know, she's afraid of that, she's aware of it, and when she's in her right mind, it keeps her from trying to let things go further, so it slows things down. Contemplation is the benchmark. Well, I think where she is at the beginning of the story, as it goes on, she seems to get more and more inside her own head.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot more people are sort of thinking about her and focusing on them, the family, and what's going on. Yeah, because initially it's kind of like, well, we're going to talk about this, but then maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's less and less because they don't want to have anything to do with them. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to hear about it. You see that with the sister.
Don't want to think about it. Kind of thing.
And then ultimately, in Amelia, when the neighbor says, we want to talk about it, no, that she shuts down. Influence character, so he has understanding, or I said misunderstanding, an issue of conditioning. You see that with he's always doing this thing that he's watching the DVDs and doing exactly the spiel. He's sort of like, I've got this spiel I have to do, and it's a way that he can sort of manage his world, but it also drives his mother a little bit to distraction. His problem is that what drives him is he can, I'd say that he has sort of a stronger perception, even if he can't see something, but he has a sense of what's going on, part of his imagination, but also ultimately the thing that allows him to still see his mom when the Babadook is there, and so he symptom of self-aware. I'm not sure exactly how that applies to him. It applies to Samuel. Unique ability of interpretation. I'd say that he's able to look at the signs and interpret what they mean. That it's here. It's I need to build these things to find it. It's not just an abstract concept anymore. It's not like the earlier ones. This is like a real threat, and so I need to behave like that. And he looks at the dog, and able to interpret what the dog means. And it's critical of a lot of situations. Basically, he's a child, and he's the source of the reason for the Babadook in some ways. He's the one
You picked out the book.
No, the book came. No, she did. The book just showed
The
up.
book just showed up, and then it was his turn to pick any book he wanted, and he chose that one. And so they started reading together, and then she's like, "Oh, maybe this isn't the right choice." And he's
Right.
like, "No, you said I could have my pick."
Right.
And so they finished the book together the first time.
Right. And then the relationship, we've got situation of past, and we chose the past. Issue of prediction. Again, I think that's where this is where the book is, specifically in the relationship.
I'm just trying to think of other examples besides the book.
The biggest issue, she's gonna kill him.
Huh?
The biggest issue, she's gonna kill him.
Well, right.
Okay.
All right. Yes.
Sure.
That kind of ruins the relationship. The catalyst is interdiction.
What is that?
It's essentially something that can come in and intercede or break up. Right? You are along a certain path. You know, things are going a certain way. Something can come in and stop it.
Well, you know, Samuel keeps saying, you know what, I'm not going to leave you. I don't want you to be hurt. There's a sense of interdiction in the things in his steadfastness toward her.
And then it's-
An effort to
save
change a
each other.
predetermined course, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then evidence is the inhibitor. Nothing coming to mind on to talk about. What do we have
Like
for?
benchmark of the present because for the relationship because
Well, all seems to take place.
well, and only that, but it's just like they're relate. You know, it's about them able to live, be together in the moment, and just be able to exist. And that becomes a very strong, stipulation. Can they even exist together anymore?
Let's look at the signposts. Actually, no, a progression. So we have the overall story, memories, into innermost desires, to impulsive responses, contemplation. I think the ending one is essentially, if you think of contemplation in the sense of, consciously considering what is going on, and I think that's where you have her sort of get a sense of her priorities and be able to fight off the Babadook by, saying over my dead body effectively. And you don't, I believe you're completely in my conscious consideration. Now I see you for what you are and go away. I'm going to kill you, and it's like, it loses all of its power, as she becomes really fully conscious of what it is. Memories, of course, is where it starts, literally in the basement with all the memorabilia. And then the sort of the fears, her fears being sort of worst fears being realized as her son seemingly goes just nuts and crazy and starts hurting people and screaming and completely not dealing with her and the creation and the introduction of the book. And then the third act, impulsive responses, that's where she's quite, she basically looks like a total burnout and is being taken over by the Babadook, and sort of on occasion is being run by this thing, sort of acting on those primal urges that she's got, that she's, I hate you. She's like, whoa, okay, back off. Yes.
Stop calling us.
Yeah, stop crawling. Well, that would actually, the crawling in the ceiling, that's kind of the midpoint. You know, when she sort of takes it in. The relationship, the past. Oh, that's nice. So you got the past, of course. That's where sort of they're just stuck in the past, and it ends up in the present, which is perfect because it's his birthday. It's now. There's nothing about the past that has any more power. You know, we're in the moment. So I think that's a perfect place for that. And then how things are changing is basically, I think that's sort of the
We're going to celebrate for the first time.
at the end, yeah, exactly. So the past into how things are changing. So it goes from we have this really bad history, and our relationship is sort of defined by it, and then it goes into sort of disintegrating. You know, another way of looking at how things are changing is progress. And so you can have positive progress and you can have negative progress. And theirs is definitely going down the tubes. And I think the third one, which is about the future, to me, it seems like it's a lot more about the future is just crumbling. You know, it could be lucky if there is even a future.
Be taken away.
Pardon?
He's going to be taken away.
He's going to be taken away. She's the Babadook. I mean, she doesn't know if she wants to have. Are we going to have a future? As
The prediction of if she's going to kill him, is that related to the future, or it's like something that could potentially happen?
Well, I think if you think about the mother-son relationship, yes, partially, I think, but also that she could be taken away from, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's the potential that she might lose him, and that's in that third act. So the fourth one, when they come back, and it's like, oh, peaches and cream, you know. And then for her, playing a role. Okay, so she's the good mother. She's the good nurse. You know, she's just the nice, playing everything by the book, but it's not showing anything of what's really going on underneath. It's being, you know, they're playing the good wife, although, you know, the husband's dead, but
The good widow.
the good widow, yeah. And then she starts, you know, so it really starts transforming by becoming a, you know, it just starts, she really starts losing her mind at that point, it seems like, you know, that's when she starts getting very haggard and losing her temper, really noticing, wanting the sexual release that she just can't seem to get, because she's constantly being interrupted at inopportune moments. And then I think the conceiving the idea is where that's when she starts to get, it's the process of her getting the idea that she's losing it and that she may be possessed, you know, that there may really be this thing, but that she's really, really, you know, at wit's end. And again, then developing a plan is, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And that's where I think, that's when she finally just sort of says, okay, enough's enough. We got to figure out how to make this work. We shouldn't say that, but that's essentially what she goes through. Almost too late, you know, she almost becomes that monster, but not quite. You know, she's able to figure out what's going on and then come around. The last possible knowledge. I mean, I think this, you know, I think that we could probably fill it out if you watch the film again. I did watch the last part tonight, and there are a lot of things that I didn't pick up the first time. You know, a lot of little subtleties that you know what you're looking for. That's why I didn't, when I saw it last night I didn't have a clue as to what the Babadook was. And when I watched the last scene tonight, it was like I've never had an inkling. It's like, oh no, okay, it's explicitly there. It's not a question. They set it up and paid it off. So it's like, okay. So, questions. I've been doing a lot of talking. Now, what I just did in terms of explaining these things, I know what the terms mean. So it's a lot easier for me to do that just sort of spontaneously. That's one of the hardest things about Dramatica is that it's got so much terminology.
Yeah.
And it's very specific. Now, the thing is, frankly, you don't have to be, you can get in the ballpark and it'll be fine. In other words, you don't be a slave to an exact definition, because usually by the time you start telling it, it's going to lose a lot of that hard edge anyway. You really, in the finished work, you don't really want to have any of that visible anyway. You want to sort of be the inspiration for what you write, but not really, you don't want to just, otherwise it sounds very formulaic and very literal, and you know, that's boring.
When you go through the software and you're like illustrating, making illustrations, it's sort of like use this word in a sentence, and that's fine when you're doing illustrations in the software. But when you're actually writing your script, you kind of want to blanket it. It needs to sound natural to your, to your story world, and to, the natural flow of what the characters are all about. But the meaning of that, a catalyst of instinct or something, it'll be there. It's just not, you just don't want to actually literally use that word in a sentence in your actual dialogue.
And the other thing is that Dramatica as a tool is you only use it where you need it. If you're writing something and it's going along great, do not then just step into Dramatica, because that'll stop everything up really quickly. If you're an organic writer, if you're a structuralist, it could be a really good thing, because structuralists find a blank page as a wall as opposed to infinite possibilities. An organic writer sees infinite possibilities, and any kind of fences you put in there is like, I don't want fences, which is fun, it doesn't matter. But at some point you have to figure out what you got, and that's when Dramatica is really useful. When you're at the point where you're starting to get feedback, it's all the other, and this is another place that's really helpful, is that you can use it as a way to understand what people are telling you. And you can use it as a way to draw from them differentials, because you can, like, for instance, just the fact that they're there for a through line. So when somebody said something about your character, it's like, well, okay, so is that, do you have a difficulty in the context of what this person is dealing with, personally, or this character is dealing with personally? Is it that? Oh, no, it's their, they've got this job and oh, okay, so this is all over in the overall story, and we can deal with it. Knowing where the problem is a huge benefit. And Dramatica gives you some of those tools, some of the language, at least for you as a writer, to use internally. Don't expect whomever you're talking with, unless they're like the Dramatica Writers Group, they're going to know anything about what you're talking about. Just talk to anybody here who's like Stephen, Sandy, or Jim, or consultants, and you don't want to go in there with Dramatica speak, because they're like, huh? Just the idea of having your main character not necessarily be the protagonist is a real big deal. And in Dramatica, that's like, okay, that's basics 101. But knowing that they're not the same, okay, fine. Now I understand what you're having trouble with. I can deal with it. I can fix that. That's one other reason that's really helpful. And then when you're talking with other people who do know it, you could really talk about very specific story element, story structure, either give or receive critiques and understand what the intent is, what they're saying, as opposed to what you think they're saying, because you're not exactly sure if their definition of character is motivation is the same as your definition of character or motivation. So, but don't be daunted by the fact that there's just so much. Use what, even just understanding that there are domains. The 4 through lines, if you don't know anything else, that alone is probably the best thing you could learn from Dramatica, is the fact that there are these four threads, these 4 perspectives, because it'll make your story much more rich than many works of fiction. And then the dynamics are also very useful, and you can have them in any combination you want, so that's nice. You can't go wrong.
So if we have a story, for example, that is not necessarily fitting naturally into the categories that are corresponding to each other, for example, like task, understanding, development, plan, and let's say we had one of them that seemed like it was just in a different category and not the right one. Does that mean that the story is not adhering to like a grand argument? Yeah, or that there's a hole in the story?
Well, okay. There's sort of 2 ways to answer that. Technically, yes, but most audience members aren't technical enough. So the real answer is are you getting the proper reception from your audience? If you are,
Does it feel right?
yeah. If you are, it doesn't matter. Because there are so many different ways, so many different things that audiences consider. One thing that this does not show, this chart does not show, is emphasis. You might have, this looks at this as, if we treat each through line and every aspect of each through line with exactly the same emphasis, it should look like that. That's not how stories are played out. Very frequently, you'll have a story like Hamlet. Well, which through line do you think they spend the most time with? Probably the main character. And it's true. If you just look at what's going on and how much screen time he has, or how much stage time he's got, how many lines he has, he's got way more than anybody else. So we're so much more focused on that one domain. And so, that's one way of looking at it. Yes. Another is, I'm interested in character, not so much interested in plot. Theme, yes, genre, no, or whatever. Sometimes those aspects that you might want to go in a different order in something or whatever, it might completely be irrelevant. It's just not going to, it's going to be lost in all the chatter. So only sweat it if you start getting, if you can't figure out what to do, you always have a place to go. And if you're getting feedback in that area, then you can always say, what if I change this to, let's say this kind of thing? And they go, oh yeah, or they say, no, that wouldn't make a difference. Well, fine. But it always gives you that alternative. So do not be a slave to Dramatica.
But sometimes it's picking apart, because the story form consists of, and appreciation is matching up the story structure point with one of the terms. So so it's like, okay, so you're thinking, all right, in all the other domains, it's understanding memories and developing a plan. But in the situation, it really feels like present is the stronger thing here. But it could be that present, for instance, is your benchmark and not your concern. Like sometimes the concern is just kind of there, but then every now and then you'll see like the benchmark really takes over toward the end and just feels much stronger than the concern. And so sometimes that's the case. So it doesn't necessarily mean your story is broken. Sometimes it does mean your story. We had a script a couple of months ago from a very experienced filmmaker, but it just didn't land. It just the thematics just were. By the time we got to it, it's just like, I don't get what the story is about in terms of what's its message. And once we started picking it apart, we realized, oh, okay, this is the impact character or the influence character. We know who the main character is, but once we understood who the impact character, and we understood that the main character actually was a change character not a steadfast character, or should be. Then once we started picking apart the pieces, we could put it back together again and understand, oh yeah, that's what you're trying to do. That's the story you're trying to get at. And it was broken because the pieces were just, disjointed, but we pulled it apart, put it back together again, and it's like, okay, that makes a lot more sense now. Or at least it felt better.
Right.
To the group members, to the audience.
So basically, it can be a platform to help you understand the story more efficiently.
Yes, and again, it's a tool. You can always go back to the mechanics, to what it says. This is the perfect way to do it. Stories are imperfect. Storytelling is even more imperfect, and then once you get the audience involved, it's even less so.
Yeah.
So you got a lot of latitude. Any other questions as far as this goes? Okay, cool. Well, next month we have the Station Agent, which is a really cute indie film. I think it was Peter Dinklage's first major role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also Bobby Cannavale, that was I think the first movie I remember him in. And and Trish Clarkson's in it too, and she's always great. And then the month after that, in December, which if you guys can make, it's a load of fun. It's where we basically create a story in class. So we have the software pick a story form at random, and we use the gists, which are essentially these little phrases instead of having. Well, let me just show you. So the gists is this thing. So for instance, I'm going to pick a number between 1 and 10.
7.
9 times out of 10, if I say that, it's 7. I tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So replace it, get some form, assign random gists, and we replace gists. Okay, so what we would do is something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what I've done is I've just randomly picked the 7th story form. And essentially you can see how for the gist, it's gone in, instead of situation, it was being stuck in someone's in-laws. And then the concern is existing in the hereafter, being responsive to someone. The problem is reconsidering a marriage proposal. So you can start immediately see, what this story is like. And our main character is pretending to be in a particular group, changing someone, a unique ability of committing oneself to the armed services, and a critical flaw of keeping a particular group's interests ahead of one's own interests. So, I mean, you can start to easily fill those things in, and that's what we do. We just sort of go round robin, one at a time. Each person, if they want, can pick a story point to illustrate. And by the end of the evening, is without fail, a really interesting story emerges, even though it seems like sort of mad-libbing, but it's all structurally sound, so it doesn't matter. So it's a lot of fun. And it's a great way if you ever get stuck or you just want to have some ideas for a story, use this. It's you could just give yourself 3 minutes and boom, and then run through and see if something's gets an idea, and then do another. Just get through the habit of doing that. And this way, you don't need to worry about what the definitions of the terms are, because it's sort of baked into the gists. And you can actually add your own gists. So as you start to create more, just sort of create your own collections of gists, and then they're in there. So it's a lot of fun.
I was going to ask, are you able to do this where you actually specifically lock in certain things and then do like only the ones that aren't locked you can switch around and around and around and see how basically the different iterations?
Yes. So for instance, let me clear the story.
Did you save it?
Yeah, this is not the Babadook.
Oh, okay.
So let's
Keep an
say
eye on it.
I I go in here and I normally, most people start in the story guide. All right. And I'm just going to overall story domain. And you can even choose to pick gists here if you want. So, or randomly do it. But let's say I want to go in and I say, I have some story forming ones I want. I want it to be an activity domain, and I want the main character to be in, fixed attitude. Okay, and then I want also the issue for the main character is going to be dealing with denial.
I'm sorry, can you just say that one more time just so I can catch up?
Sure.
What are the choices?
Overall story, activity, main characters, fixed attitude, main character issue, denial.
And so within denial, there's 55 potential gists. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now.
Right.
Unless you add
Right.
And so then if I went to my brainstorming, I could say keep the existing story forming choices. So the ones I've chosen, it's going to keep. But I'm going to just have it randomly assign gists. And if I already assigned gists, I could say keep existing gists. The things that didn't exist, it would just play with all the other stuff. So now, and let's say I also want it to be a change, failure, good story.
And you have the little locks there, right? But those,
Right,
those
that's-
still work,
Do you
right?
need
Yeah,
to
they-
lock
they-
them in order for that?
No,
For okay.
not in the brainstorming.
Not
So
for
because by
brainstorming.
saying keep the existing story
Oh.
forming choices, it'll keep
That's
them.
what it does. Okay.
So if I spin, you'll see it's going to be a change, steadfast.
Right. All the ones that you've planted, they stay the same. And the only things that switch are.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So you can play around with that.
But the nice thing, unlike other story structure software, is
Mhm.
it's not just randomly picking something there.
Right.
It's randomly picking something within
Yeah.
a certain framework,
Mhm.
so that it's all thematically coherent.
So overall story domain, fighting for independence, concern, getting a green card, issue, declining public morality versus self-interest. I mean, so you can immediately just sort of, the story is just sort of, oh, I can see where this is going.
Mhm.
Showing us
And these,
steadfast
to some extent, are I mean, considerably flexible. So there are a lot of potentials just within that as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, there are 12,000
Sure.
gists, and then you might find one that's close to what you want. Then just create one that you want.
Mhm.
You know, it's not getting a green card. I want to, getting, I don't know, Social Security card or whatever. Getting citizenship. So you go in and create one called getting citizenship.
Mhm.
And that's the nice thing is that usually when I'm doing an analysis of something, first pass through, I'll do the story form. And if it's going to be a really exhaustive analysis, I'll then do some illustrating. And then I go back in and I create the gists from the illustrations. Because the gist should have the essence of the meaning of the structural item with the storytelling. So I sort of mix it together. And the reason that you want to do that is that then if you have reports, they start to sound a lot more reports. Oh, yeah. Particularly this one called the fourth through line themes.
Mhm.
So I've just randomly spun this, and it says, in summary, the overall story through line of your story explores the effects of fighting for independence, indicating that conflict exists because of an activity or endeavor. Most, if not all, of the parties involved are primarily concerned with getting a green card. The common goal in the story through line involves acquiring someone. In order for the protagonist and allies to achieve this goal, it requires engaging in illicit activities. This is accomplished in part by putting on a disguise. This is also done in spite of seemingly arbitrary conditions imposed on the effort in the form of improving the situation. Benefits are accrued on the way to acquiring someone in the form of having a crush. These counter the costs of finding a future husband from a particular group. The consequence of not accomplishing this goal is being transformed by a particular group. These consequences are foreshadowed by stuttering when agitated. So, I mean, it makes it it starts to sound much more like a story. And then, of course, if you tailored it to your story, it'll read a lot more like a very canned but understandable essence of what the thematics are of your story.
Right. Yeah, great.
The story guide, I generally suggest people use level 1 the first time through and make something up completely from scratch. Either just think of it, follow use a fairy tale as inspiration, because at least you have some storytelling to sort of hang things on and sort of some characters and stuff. Or just make something up out of whole cloth. The reason is you'll be focusing less on the story and more on the process. and as you go through it, spend no more than say 3 minutes on a topic. And if it's a fill in the blank and you don't have anything, leave it blank. If it's a multiple choice, pick something. Because again, it's the process, not the.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you've gone through it, it makes it a lot easier to understand the kinds of questions it's going to ask. Even if you've gone through level 3, which has like 257 questions or some ridiculously large number like that, which is frankly spending more time writing about your story than actually writing it. That's not all the questions that are in here. There are a lot more than that. That's why I said don't be a slave to this. Just use it as a tool. All right.
Great.
Cool. Well, I'm glad the 3 of you got here. That's great. Good to see new faces. New blood. And 2 women, 3 women. Well, yes, 2 new women. This is
Last time I checked, so.
well, 4 if we included the on the phone.
Oh yeah, and then yes.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
Yay.
no,
we do need
that's
more
nice. We definitely need a lot more
more
women.
diverse perspectives.
Mars needs women.
How big is this group usually?
This is big.
This is it ranges from about 4 or 5, and we've had it up to the room being full.
Oh.
This is
25.
yeah, we had just ridiculously large at one at that 2 times. But usually it's between 4 and 6. And then whoever's online.
There's 4 tonight.
Hmm?
There's 4 tonight.
Oh, 4 online? Wow. Okay, great. So yeah, this is actually, I guess, including people online. That's more than normal.
Writers group, we usually have anywhere between 6 and 10. Yeah, 6 or 8 usually.
Okay.
So it's about the same. Although they tend to be slightly different people. There's
Yeah.
some who always come to users group without writers group, and some who always come to the writers group without users group.
So next month, what I would like, if you do come, think of a movie for next year. I'm going to take precedence for people who actually show up here first. And I do like to go for variety, but so we usually try to do comedy, drama, romance, musical, just something classic. We did horror because we either do a horror or science fiction because it's October.
Well, we did
And we do
tomorrow.
a film.
We did Edge of Tomorrow earlier in the year.
Right.
That was a really good.
That is good.
That was, I consider that an action.
And what?
Action adventure.
Action adventure.
Oh, I thought it was a sci-fi.
It is sci-fi.
It's awesome.
I just have
A lot of action.
It's very funny.
yeah.
It's really
So,
What were you saying about foreign films?
I also make sure we do at least 1 foreign film. We did 2 this year, but
Yeah, how did this briefing come through?
yeah, it was not all there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, do you run through stuff and find that it's not fitting? Interesting.
I mean, I try not to make
More so lately.
right.
Princess Bride. Princess
What?
Bride? Have we not done
I'm gonna
Princess
vote for
Bride?
Princess.
No, we have not.
Oh.
Wow.
Well, hey.
That's surprising.
All right.
Consensus?
Yeah. Absolutely. I haven't seen it
You have
in
to be here
years.
next month.
I love that.
That won't happen.
Huh?
I don't think there's a story there.
We will find out if it's on the list. Anyway, so.
But it was nice meeting everyone.
Good
Bye.
Good night.
Good to see you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it has a story.
Best movie ever?
One of them. One of my favorites. Back when Rob Reiner made good films.
I would say it's original.
Yeah. Well, it's based on a book, but yes.
No, the book is very original. It's even more so.
There have been a couple films this year where the concerns don't line up, like what you were asking. Like what's
Oh,
the-
right.
Not Frozen. Right. And sometimes, you know, like for instance, Z was a foreign movie that was a political thriller, but it
It
didn't.
wasn't enough
It
there.
really was. Yeah.
There really wasn't even much of a main character.
But,
Yeah, 'cause,
Wow,
yeah, especially
that's
with
huge.
I wouldn't say foreign films, you know, but that's something like specifically like Z,
Mhm.
in the way that it's done,
Well,
seems as though its methodology is different. Yeah.
Right. It's supposed to be more of a cinema verite, so it's
Yeah.
documentary-ish. It's not a documentary.
But it's not. But it's just not
I know-
making
I
a
know
specific
Pennywise style, yeah.
full what you call
Argument. It's not making an argument. No, it's definitely making a lot of points.
Right.
Very specific points, but they're not, by design or not, they are not a cohesive set of points.
Right.
That make a simple and a
Right.
comprehensive
Whole
argument.
But then, but then we did Frozen, and it's just like we could not line it up. It was just it was thematically, or did we never did a right
Really?
consensus on Frozen.
Well, I think,
right?
yeah, I think the Frozen is that there are a couple ways of reading the story, you know, because you have the sisters sort of thing going on, but then the love interest is a little more than just being there, but, you know.
We're actually
so-
writing a script that we're having that exact issue with, where we have three characters and we're not really sure who's
So-
fitting as
so
the influence.
What you want to do with that, you have two choices. You make it about one of the relationships, and that the whole story is about relationships, which those tend to be okay, but not as really successful as they might otherwise be. Or you have two stories, and you can have.
And then essentially you have two almost
story
two
forms.
Dramatica projects
Oh yeah,
overlapping on it.
yeah. And the thing
That's what we keep hitting. We keep
Yeah,
hitting
no,
that wall,
and
yeah.
the thing is, you can have Jerry Maguire is the big one. Is the one where you have.
Oh, really?
Sure, you've got the sports story and you've got the love story.
Do you have that online?
Yeah, we did it.
And you
Yes.
broke it down twice, essentially?
Yeah.
Or- oh,
Yeah,
wow.
we did it. And the thing is that what's confusing about it is that Jerry Maguire is the main character in the sports story and the influence character in the love story. Because
Right.
Renee Zellweger is the
Right,
main character. He's a steadfast character in the sports story, but a changed character in the love story. So you've got him changing in one context and remaining steadfast in the other. Both of them as subjective characters. And you've got Cuba Gooding Jr. is the influence character, change influence character in the
With regards
sports
to
story.
sports, right?
And Renee Zellweger is the steadfast main character. And they even have completely different sets of characters. You've got the love story has the son and has all of her sister and all her sister's friends that are just part of that story. And then Renee Zellweger is obviously, and Jerry Maguire are also in the sports story. Renee Zellweger is just essentially a secretary in that one, a sidekick, support character. And you've got all the sports agents and the sports guys.
advertisers.
Yeah, everybody dealing with the sports stuff and the show me the money side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when you do that, it's going to be a longer work because you have a lot more you have to cover.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that made it a little more confusing is that the story forms, the dynamics are 50% of them are the same in both. So it kind of makes it a little confusing as to which story are we talking about here?
Always have to remember which story.
Just right, and it's just a matter of story time. And for the most part, it doesn't matter. It just will make it longer.
Mhm.
Now, the other thing is that they pretty much evenly balance those. They're two full stories. You can also do what I think Frozen was trying to do and sort of kind of did, but not really fully, is to have a main story and then a secondary story. where the relationship between her and the guy in Frozen was supposed to be basically a secondary story, but it wasn't treated that way because he's such an important part of the overall story of the main story that it was a little messy. Which is why at the end, when you have him going to save the day and then he sort of stops and then it's suddenly just the two sisters, you know, like, well, it's kind of a, sort of leaves him out in the cold, literally. You know, that was left that unresolved. Well, sure, because that story's not really been completed, so you know that the next one's going to probably have something to it. But or the third out or sister, or older sister.
We got one Frozen. We're gonna have to check
But
it.
but anyway, that's you can easily run into that problem if you have multiple stories going on and you don't know it.
Mhm.
Like Finding Nemo is a good example. Of
Yeah,
the
Finding
sub-story.
Nemo is a great one because you have
That's
the
a double
Finding,
story too.
Yeah, you've got
It's
the
the
Finding
sub-story.
Nemo story, and
Oh,
then you
I see.
have Nemo in the fish tank story, and then each one of those are completely separate, and you spend almost equal time on them.
And both those are online, like here's
And
the
both
cherry.
of both of those have full double story
Yeah,
No,
breakdowns.
No,
or
no, no.
Finding Nemo
It
is
just
just
has a
one.
little bit. It's like a tiny bit.
yeah.
Like you sure.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, the main story is more fully developed.
So the larger one is this main story, which this is actually Finding Nemo.
Which is the one actually
Right,
looking
and
for.
then
Right.
if you
Good story.
go to the sub story, this is the one with just
Sub story. Okay.
so there's just a little bit of it in there. So
Right.
you don't have stuff down
Right.
to
It's
the
not
issue and
right.
the
It's not
problem.
down to the
No,
exact
right.
specifics. It's right. It's the
It's just a
general
little
arc.
bit of
Right.
it, yeah.
Okay.
Right, they set up a main influence, and they kind of have sort of like part of it's developed, but there's really no earned change. There's a change, but you gotta get the idea that they've sort of really sped things along, abbreviated it.
And then the other option for the main pictures, which you were talking about, was to make it about the relationship.
Yeah, in other words, you essentially have
And the other person's just kind of there.
right. It's the third wheel sort kind of thing. It's what you have for not Judy. What's the one with?
Four weddings.
Well, that has multiple sub stories.
Well, if you're talking about stories that are about relationships, that's where like Four
Yeah,
Weddings
Four
or a
Weddings,
Funeral or
Funeral.
something like that, where it's all about.
Or no, I was thinking of the one with Audrey Hepburn, and her character's name.
All about Eve.
No, it's one word.
It's not Tiffany's.
No, it's Humphrey Bogart and she are supposed to have a bit of a relationship. So.
Oh yeah, we did that last year
No, a long time ago.
or 2 years ago.
Yeah. Anyway, I haven't. It's one of the posters I've used forever. Sabrina.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and the third and the other brother is the other is the third wheel. He's also into Sabrina. And not the modern one. The modern one
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work.
I just like that suggestion for a film to analyze. Has anyone have we done Skyfall? We haven't done Skyfall in the users group. Has
No.
anyone done Skyfall? There's a real interesting.
Because of
There's a
because
real
of
interesting
Bond.
triangle there.
Oh, that's the triangle.
Wow.
There is an interesting. I mean, there's at least in my analysis, there's a main and impact character, but there is a third wheel involved in that relationship.
Well, there's another relationship that's really not fully explored. Yes. Yeah. Anyway.
Well,
essentially
if you're-
mother and two brothers.
Right, exactly, yeah, and so it's that third
not
wheel
The one that's
does inform.
unexplored, you're saying? The mother and two brothers?
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got a backstory. Essentially.
Right.
There's a backstory that's a lot of it is exposed during Skyfall,
Mhm.
and sort of like the last act of it is played as the basis for Skyfall.
Right, yeah. It kind of goes back all the way to his house and everything.
Well, yeah, but you don't really. I mean, you don't know much of anything about that.
Right. Yeah.
That's his backstory. But I mean, the brother meaning Javier Bardem. You know, not literally a brother, but they're both products of mother of M.
Right.
You know, and you know, Javier Bardem even has the "you and I are just alike," he says to James Bond. And it's like, yeah, okay, I know.
Yeah, but the fact is, what he does is he, even in his own twisted way, because he's evil, of course, but his own twisted way, he is giving he's giving expression to the relationship between Bond and M that is not being expressed because Bond is so, like, you know, non-expressive, and M isn't that expressive either, and so he, in a way, he is illuminating that relationship in his own, you know, subversive way, and that's why I attribute him to be the third wheel who illuminates the nature of that relationship.
Right.
So that's why I think that it would be.
But
an
I don't.
discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except I think that the Javier Bardem character sees himself as having that relationship with James Bond. They are similar because they both have a relationship, sort of the good son and the prodigal son, the prodigal son and the evil son with M, but it's a very dysfunctional family thing.
Yeah. But it
doesn't, and whatever happened in Skyfall was in the movie wasn't really explained per se. It was something.
You mean in terms of the objective story?
Yeah, and Bond's past that seemed to tie this together somehow. You know.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I think story form wise, it's I think it was unique among Bond films.
Oh yeah. The newer ones have definitely a lot more going on story wise. Period.
They're trying.
Right. I mean, prior to that, really the only one I think that probably story form would have been on Her Majesty's Secret Service. No. Yeah. What was it? It's the only one that had an influence character. The rest just had. I mean,
So Princess Bride, Skyfall,
Goldfinger, but
So
that's
far,
just
those
so
are-
lightweight. Huh?
So far, those are not great choices.
Not good stories, not
Right.
good illustrations of strong story forms.
Right.
There's a film that changes kind of story a little bit, like plot points, and also medium, kind of dramatically, throughout the film, but somehow comes back to the beginning and towards the end feels kind of like everything is still linked. I've never seen a film be able to do that.
Which is what?
Congress with Robin Wright. It never really hit the theaters. I think it was probably there for like a week or a day or something like that. It's on Amazon now. I don't know if it's on Netflix. But it's called Congress, and it's a newer film. I think it came out last year, 2014, I think, or
I was
2015.
vaguely familiar, but I didn't see it. I didn't have an opportunity to see it.
Yeah, I think people should check that one out. It's so different than anything. And it does somehow, talking about stories that split, somehow you follow this main character, and you definitely have a main character. That the entire journey it's almost as the world evolves, or how technology evolves and stuff like that. I think the main through-red is the fact that humanity doesn't change. The way we think or what we do or how we play with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it kind of uses different mediums to kind of explore, that. I guess it would be considered a sci-fi, but some people put it in the animation category.
Interesting.
But it's not an animation.
Interesting.
It's off like your first 30 to almost 40 minutes, pure live action.
Oh.
I would recommend checking out as a possible thing to study next year because it's so unique. Congress.
Well, remember, I mean, for this particular purpose, the storytelling is not nearly is really not as relevant. I mean, storytelling is great. I love different creative forms of storytelling, but often,
We're setting
Very-
structure, right?
right? Yeah, very often you
That's
get
what
a lot
I'm
of.
talking about.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm curious because of how the structure, especially like how everything can still stay glued together, especially like that makes a story work. That would be interesting to study, like put Dramatica to that structure.
Okay.
Because it
I haven't.
was-
Yeah, I'm
I'm
not
just
familiar with it
talking
at all.
about-
Okay. Well, that'll be a discussion for next time. That I want to do that once we've done the station agent, which that'll be a little bit of a challenge because it is a 3-person movie.
Mhm.
It has a number of relationships going on, but one seems to be principal. And that's it.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anya's, are you still there?